Hello everyone. I just try to bring Ming. Hello everyone. So try to bring our guest here. Just talk with her. Give me a second. Hello. Hi.
Hi, Mahama.
Hi. How are you?
Fine.
Hello everyone. So hopefully, more people are joining, and there are already some here. Great. So thanks everyone for joining, and we are happy that this week and next week actually we are talking with some great computer scientists who are working on robotics and related areas. And interestingly, they are also husband and wife. So that's also interesting view about life of two great scientists. So we have Professor Ming Lin that, as I mentioned, she's working on robotics. We talk about research things a lot. And more than that, she was actually the department chair of UMD, University of Maryland Computer Science Department, and she had also great experience on that. I have not seen any other like live or anything with a department chair. I think she will talk what is the difference between a department chair and be a manager in a company. We will talk about those things. Actually, these are quite interesting, and there is a big difference. One is more democratic, hopefully. The other one is more like in a kingdom family in some sense, and decided by higher ups. Good. So I think without further ado, let's go and talk with Professor Ming Lin. And one other thing, yeah. So I think you got your PhD from Berkeley. What was the year? 1980 something, correct?
No, actually, I got my PhD from Berkeley at the end of '93.
Oh, 93, okay. Sorry, yeah. So it was just checking this thing. Great. And I think you can talk more about it and the research. We will discuss it. And I mean, some of this, this is the typical things that you may mention something. Sometimes I will mention my understanding from your research areas, especially about the research things, such that other people possibly can understand it better. At least I understand it better. So good. So without any further ado, I think we can start. And yeah, so I think we want to say something at the beginning, or then I can ask some questions and we can discuss.
You ask away. You ask away, and I'll answer it.
Good. So I think let's start. I mean, from your, that's the thing that we have typically here. We have this idea that any great scientist, to me, the life and the story of life for that person is important. I really like whenever I see some, like Elon Musk or other people, lots of things about their childhood or something is written or mentioned in media. But for scientists, not too much of that has been happened. There are something in Wikipedia, but they are very short. So we start essentially with your life. So from the beginning, so you have been born in Taiwan, correct?
That's right.
Good. Okay, so you can start essentially. So, what was? Did you imagine that you want to become a famous computer scientist in a top U.S. universities when you were a child? When did you start to think about math and computer science? And then we can go after.
Okay. When I was a kid, I don't even know what is a computer scientist, to be honest. It was not a discipline, and you know, it's not something I've heard of. But I love math, and you know, I'm always curious. I'm one of those very abnormal child that would read up the whole entire math book before the school starts. I would do all the problems in the book on my own. My dad actually never had a college degree. He has some eyesight problems, so he never pursued a college degree. And in Taiwan, to get into a university, you have to go through a national entrance exam, very similar to a lot of countries in Asia. It's very, yeah, it's in Iran, it's the same. It's the same in China. I believe it's very similar to many of the Eastern Asian countries, and in still, you know, many different parts of Asia. So my dad, because of eyesight problem, he never took the national entrance exam. So he never have, you know, enter a university. My mom did have a college degree. My parents was incredibly tolerant. Whatever I want to do, they let me do it. They never really tell me what to do, not to do. But I just love math since I was a kid. Like I say, I read all the book on my own and did all the problem. I figure out how to do factorization before the teacher ever taught us.
So, how old have you been at that time?
How old was I at that time? I don't know, like elementary school.
Elementary school, good.
Yeah, elementary school.
Yeah, actually, even for me, it was like that. I remember that I have, yeah, this. I think my parents also didn't know that much what I'm doing. Essentially, I'm thinking about this when I'm talking with my children. Maybe I'm doing too much attention to them. I mean, should I do that or not? But yeah, that's actually, I heard this one from Professor Ellen. She also mentioned that, I mean, at that time when she was a student, I mean, there was no pressure, nothing. I think that's actually a good thing. It can be quite flourishing later in life that you decide what you want to do. Great. So, like you had the elementary school, and then at that time you did. What was your like imagination for your job? Because I remember, I mean, the people were thinking about, I want to be a pilot, I want to be a teacher, or something like that. Some people think about their parents' job. So, what was your?
Okay, I don't really typically share this with people, but if I tell you, you probably wouldn't believe me. But I want to be a spy.
Yeah, that's.
I wanted to be a spy, and part of the reason was, I still remember when I was 8, we were asked to draw a picture of who we want to be.
Yeah.
And I drew myself to be a spy like 007 because I watched a lot of James Bond movie, and I love all those science gadgets. And I thought it was really cool that he would, you know, like the James Bond was doing all these great things that would, like, you know, for the freedom and promoting the welfare of society and the country, and doing all these things behind the scenes. So that's kind of what I wanted to be. And so I remember I was a kid in Taiwan, grew up in Taiwan, and there was always a tension between China and Taiwan when I was a child. And, you know, I think we watch a lot of these TV movies and show that, you know, people in China did not really have a lot of freedom. I would say that this has largely changed. Okay, so I actually, for the last couple of decades, I have experiences and I have visited China, and I think there are definitely still human rights issue in China, but it's in many ways economically, it's really turning into more a capitalistic society. They still prohibit, freedom of speech to some large degree. They still have a lot of censorship, but compared to what it was like when I was a kid, China has gone a very, very long way. And as a country, it has changed a lot. But when I was a child, I remember watching all these footages, movies, and what was going on in China. And I was just thinking, oh my God, all my countrymen and all the Chinese and all my people are suffering. And so I wanted to be able to do something. And I thought, if I have a James Bond, I can rescue them all. And that was a very kiddish, imagination watching too many of those James Bond movies. So yeah, that was what I wanted to be a spy, but playing with all these high-tech gadgets, and it's kind of crazy now. I look back, but it is sort of what I wanted to be.
Actually, I wanted to exactly ask you about this one, like the relation between Taiwan and China that you mentioned actually briefly. Because when I was a child, actually at that time there was it was 8 years war between Iraq and Iran. So I remember lots of things. I mean, that's like the sirens are going on, and I mean, like some rockets are coming, or missiles or other things that are coming. This is like not a very good, I mean, some of these are not that great. And I think there was no war between Taiwan and China, and hopefully there would be no such thing.
Right. And I mean, the relationship between Taiwan and China has been, generally speaking, very peaceful. There may be some time that was tense, but nothing compared to, say, like right now, what's going on in Europe, which I think is beyond my imagination.
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to say, or best praise for the people at Ukraine is like very unjust war came to them. I mean, I can feel that if my children are at home and things coming and they might be dead, it's like unimaginable.
Yeah.
I think this is like we try to pray for them. Hopefully this war is ended as soon as possible. I think nobody expected such a war happen, I don't know, in 2022.
Yeah.
But unfortunately it happens. And we hope that it does not become worse than that.
Yeah.
Great. And I think it does not go to other areas like Taiwan and China and other things. So these are, if you read the news, they will discuss all of these things. Hopefully this type of thing does not happen. Great. So now, when you what was the difference between a boy or a girl when you were studying math or other things? Did you feel anything?
No. I mean, I don't know. I never felt anything. At least growing up in China. I mean, I'm growing up in Taiwan, not China. I never really felt anything. That I was being treated differently. I was the firstborn, and my parents gave me a lot of responsibility. For a couple of years, I was running the household when my parents was in the U.S. So, I know how to cook since I was 8. I was running the whole entire household since I was, a teen. Actually, even before I became a teen. So I was being treated very well by my parents, and they give me a lot of responsibility. And I feel that was, sort of great, because it made me feel like a grown up, even though I was just a child. And that helped building confidence regarding sort of, what I can potentially do, and autonomy. And I never feel like I was being treated differently because I was a girl or a boy. I was a teacher's pet. Most of my teachers treat me really well. So I never feel I was being treated differently. So no, there was never that. And I think that makes a huge difference. I really did not sense that being a girl is any different than being a boy, to be honest. And I also went to a middle school, which is a Catholic, girls' middle school. And again, it's all women. So we all treated the same. So I never felt, even in the middle school, I was treated differently.
So what about the elementary school? Was it girl and boy separate, or they were the same?
No, they were all together, co-ed.
But
Yeah.
The middle school is the one that you went to.
Yeah, in the middle school, I went to a Catholic, middle school, and it was run by the nun. So it's all women. And, as I mentioned, in Taiwan, it's not just going to the university. You have to have the college entrance exam. Even going to high school, you have to have the entrance exam. They place you based on your exam performance. So kids and students start studying really seriously since middle school, because our household was not in the best school district. So my parents decided to send me to basically a Catholic middle school for all women and girls, whatever, young adults, young women. And so it's not quite as expensive. And it's all women and all girls. So it was really nice. I didn't have to worry about all those typical problems that there may be other kids were experiencing at that time. So I did not feel any different.
Great. And that's actually, one other thing for the audience, in case they have a question, they can ask. And I think we have people from internationally. So we talk about China, US, now actually London. So these are the previous guests that we have. And now from Taiwan. And some of this actually very important, because that you will hear from, a scientist, is that view, and you will see the life of the people at that time. And I think that's very interesting to see the similarities and the similarities between different countries. Like this that you mentioned, like in Iran also, it is like that there is some exception. If you become you go to the Olympiads or others, you may bypass essentially the entrance exam for the colleges. Otherwise, you need to go to that exam. That's actually the brutal exam. The people are studying for 3-4 years for that.
Right.
Because that decides where do you go, and that decides your future. So, which university did you go in Taiwan?
What school?
Yes. The college, yeah.
Oh, college. I did not go to college in Taiwan.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So that's
I actually came here at the end of my middle school. Like I mentioned, my parents was actually here, and they were I know it sounds really crazy, but my parents invested in a sandwich deli shops. So they brought a lot of life saving. They brought a huge amount of money to open a store here on a sandwich deli shop, not a traditional Chinese restaurant. Yeah. And so they came here on the investment status. And so they had to sort of build up the store. And that's why, for a couple of years, and that's when I was taking care of the whole entire family and running a household. When I was going to a private school and preparing for my entrance exam, it was very stressful. My joke is I was used to sleeping 2 hours a day, even when I was a kid. And that was a great training, because I have to run the whole entire household, clean the house, cook and everything, and still have to study. And the study in Taiwan during that time was very, very intense. I still remember, I have exams every day, every single class. And so the idea there was to train you to take exam so much, you become sort of indifferent to take exams. And and so I actually went to high school here. I went to high school in the US.
So how old have you been the time that you moved to US? How old have you been at that time that you moved to US?
I was around 14, 15. 14. So I went to the high school here in the US.
And I think undergrad, you have been at Berkeley as well?
Yes. Yes and no. Yes, half the time. I actually, so I went to high school in California, and I actually went to a university nearby. My SAT verbal score was not good enough for Berkeley. It was, I was just only here 4 years, so it wasn't good enough for Berkeley. but UCLA gladly took me. And so I went to UCLA for 2 years. I have practically a perfect GPA from UCLA. And I requested transfer from UCLA to Berkeley because I always wanted to go to Berkeley.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a really nice story. I mean, and like, you know, when I talk with the people, I mean, I know the people better. Some of this probably we didn't had any time to discuss. I think that's a good time. And this is, I think, lots of inspiration for the people that, I mean, like you were working very hard. It's like you are doing some other chores in the house as well. It's not the case that you were always thinking about like just studying and you want to be a scientist. So when you entered, did you have any imagination at high school that you want to become a professor or researcher or?
No, I mean, I didn't know what I really want to do. You know, I am constantly amazed at all these students who, you know, I have met since I've been a professor. I'm going to be honest. All I know was when I was in high school or even middle school, I love math, and my exposure to science started in elementary school, but it's limited. And most of my exposure and foundation to science is really in the middle school. I know since the middle school, I love physics. I love, you know, generally speaking, I like science. My, you know, I always like math and I love physics. I also enjoy chemistry, less so about biology, even though I do really well in memorization. So I always ace my biology. I did well in biology, but I never really enjoyed the biology. So I love math. I love physics. Chemistry was also fine. I did well in chemistry as well. So I know like tech, science and tech and math, you know, the STEM field was what I want to do because that's what I enjoy. But I don't know what I want to be. I mean, like I say, you know, my imagination, my dream job was a spy.
Did it change when you were at high school or still that was your dream job?
No, I mean, of course I know by the time I went to high school, I'm not qualified to be a spy, okay? And no, I did not know what I want to do, but I do know I want to study, you know, generally speaking, the STEM area, possibly engineering. I thought engineering will be a good combinations of the science and math because I don't want to be a pure mathematician, nor do I want to be a pure scientist. So I thought engineering would actually be a good area. So when I actually entered UCLA, I was admitted directly into the college, you know, their school of engineering. And I self-declared to be in electrical engineering. But being an electrical engineering, you have to take computer science course. So that was my beginning exposure of computer science. When I request transfer, and actually it's not a request, you have to actually apply. And inter-UC transfer has the least priority. They always give, Berkeley always give priority to community college first. So the last group of students they admit is between UC transfer. And so I got admitted, I was very lucky. And so I transferred to Berkeley as a junior. And since my undergraduate major at UCLA was double E, I took tons of engineering course. I took tons of electrical engineering course. So the closest major to request transfer to was EECS at Berkeley. I already have a lot of CS course. So I transferred to EECS. So EE and CS was a combined major at Berkeley, and that's where I got my.
I think there are several, I mean, universities, like even at MIT, it is ESCS, it's the same things. It may change it now, it's more like CS becomes like now very dominant field. But yeah, lots of schools are like that. For Michigan, I think it's still ECS in some sense.
Right. And you know, I mean, I'm going to say that was a great education that I have received. You know, I mean, I want to be honest that all of Berkeley classes are very big, even in the 80s, in the late 80s. And they were really, really big. Even my upper division courses was already 100 something. But the combinations of having these, both the EE side and the CS side was great to give you a really broad spectrum of what a computer looked like, from the hardware all the way to the software. And also because I love math. I always loved math. I took tons of math courses. I almost have enough math course to even declare, like, you know, like at least a minor, if not a major in math. But I did not bother, because there are so formality, and I did not really see necessarily the value of declaring a major just for the sake of a transcript. So I did not never, you know, I mean, for me, it was more important to take the courses. I audited a lot of math course on my own. So I did feel like that education of having an engineering background and having also a CS perspective and the training was great. It gave me a lot of foundations and allow me the flexibility to move my research today, you know, from just
I
practical.
think that we actually talk more about the research thing. So then I think you are like one of the, sometimes the people will change from like undergrad to grad, but you didn't change. You have continued your study at Berkeley.
No, I do think I changed. I do think I changed. So as an undergrad, I was more double E. I took a lot more double E courses. And my undergraduate advisor, it's a very famous person. He was the former dean of College of Engineering at Berkeley. That's Shankar Sastry. He was in control theory. So as an undergrad, I took tons of signal processing control theory courses, you know, stochastic controls and so on. But when I went to grad school, I actually switched more to CS, and my research was more on the algorithmic technique and foundations in robotics. And my advisor, John Kenny, was, you know, a doctoral dissertation award winner of AC and doctoral dissertation award. He was like superstar, just graduated from MIT. There was only about 10 people who understand his dissertation at that time, because that's how deep his work is. So I did switch, and I learned a lot more about, you know, the algorithmic technique, particularly related to computational geometry, when I was in grad school, versus a lot of, you know, traditional CS students. If they want to learn computational geometry, they can take computational geometry as undergrad. I took it, you know, I learned the material when I was in grad school. So I did switch from more EE side, even though I have exposure for both. I did switch from EE to CS in that transition.
That's exactly the thing that I mentioned. So now, I mean, now that you mentioned the story, I understand that your research actually has both components now. Some of these more like the E type of things, as well as this algorithmic foundation. That I think that's like the way that to understand any person, you need to see it from the beginning. That's the way that I feel much better. Great. So one interesting thing. So I think you married with Dinesh Manucha. So is it when did you do that? So was it during the the graduate school or after that? Where did, how did you know each other?
Well, Dinesh always joke that Shankar Sastry, my undergraduate advisor, was our matchmaker. Yeah, I mean, it's true to some degree, but not really. But anyway, I was working for John Kenny, and I needed an office, and Shankar Sastry was the one who assigned me to an office where Dinesh's office was also at. So we were office mate, but both of us was rarely there. And what happened was, I think shortly after, they renovate the whole entire robotics group of faculty, renovate the whole entire space in Corey Hall, which that's where the EECS building is located. And so they basically built a big, they constructed or renovated a big space for all the RA or all the research assistant in robotics together in one big labs. So we, you know, our office was like 32, 36 people. That's how big it is. So we were office mates, and our desk was right next to each other. And then we were also lab mates. But that's still you know, doesn't really like
Mean that you
it
did good.
yeah, yeah. So he sees me, and we also took a course together. And so he know about my research, and he got really interested in some of my research, and we collaborated. And that, you know, I mean, anyway, I mean, one thing lead to the other. We were good friends.
Yeah, and so this good. So like, so how long have you been married now? It is like long time, correct?
Yeah. Gosh, we got married in '94.
Okay, so like essentially just 1 year after your graduation.
Right, right.
Great. So how has been life? I will ask this one from Dina hopefully next week. How has been life like a two scientists? I think both you had lots of inspiration and you wanted to essentially achieve more and more. So how was the life for you? And particularly, I mean, was there any effect for children as well?
Yeah, I mean, we have two kids. You know, it's let me put it that way. Like any marriage, there are always challenges, and you know, when you're a husband working the same area as you do, sometimes could be too close for comfort. And you know, we are both, like all PhD, we all both have very strong opinion, and so it's great that you can talk about things that your husband can understand. But if you have different opinion, you know, the opinion will crash. And so we have our argument, and we disagree on things. But it's always great and nice to have somebody can understand what you're doing. And, you know, and I would sometimes seek his feedback. Challenging problems, you know, a lot of time it's not necessary research discussion, but, you know, dealing with like students, administration stuff, or, you know, just general opinions about people that we know. And we also work in a very similar area because his advisor is also John Kenny, and we work in a very similar area. So we talk about people that we know, right? And so it's kind of great to have that kind of conversations. But, you know, like everything, it's like you bring work home, and our kids know just about everything because they hear too much of our discussion. Both of them are grown up now. I mean, it's terrible when your daughter knows about NSF, DAPA, all the fighting games, all your colleagues, you know, just about everything that around you. So I would say there is no separation of life and work, and it's not necessarily healthy, but, you know, it's kind of like a lifestyle we have. And we both work really hard. My joke is it's great that he's a workaholic because it made me a workaholic.
Yeah, I will come to that point actually. I have created
Yes,
tools
I
for those
cannot
type of things. Yeah, but I think one interesting thing is that like I was actually fortunate that two of my students that graduated last year, like Master and Soil, actually they were husband and wife, and they joined also. They went to Berkeley and Stanford for postdoc, and they are joining Northeastern as faculty. And so the one thing that actually I have noticed sometimes, there was sometime competition. So have you had any competition, I mean, some awards or something like that you think that you should have got it or you didn't get it because of him or vice versa?
So we made whatever agreement that we never compete with each other directly. So, you know, we rarely try to compete for anything. So that's something that we had a pact on. We never really compete with each other. Any awards, it's just sort of, or recognition whatsoever. So those are things that we avoid. And we collaborate on grants and proposal. You know, it's, I mean, he's one of the best known people in the field. I'm reasonably, you know, known and have track record. So, you know, having each other as a co-PI doesn't hurt. And like I said, we have had in the past jointly supervised students. We currently don't have any really joint supervised PhD students, but we have had in the past with co-advised students. But you know, there are definitely great benefit of having one of your collaborator as your, you know, your spouse. And but like I said, there is also no separation of work and home. And it's not always necessary the lifestyles everybody wants. I do recognize that. But, you know, he has been supportive, and I don't know, based on what I have seen, I'm not sure every single man is necessarily going to be supportive of their wife. Right. For, you know, I mean, that is definitely a challenge for a lot of women I know in the STEM field. So, you know, I would say that's a blessing for me, because it's not always easy to find someone who is supportive of whatever you want to do. And I've been lucky. I have my parents who are always very supportive. And again, my dad did not get a college degree. And for my parents to think about their kids wanted to go get a PhD, it's like, what? But they didn't stop me. And they encourage me and always give me the freedom and supportive of whatever I want to do. So I'm very appreciative of my parents' support. And I would say the same for Dinesh. Is he, generally speaking, he may or may not agree with everything I want to do, but he has been very, generally speaking, supportive. Yeah. And if I want to do something stupid, he will also tell me.
The audience, actually, we have started, I mean, from the childhood, and then now we came like a husband and wife that are both great scientists. How is their life? And that's the thing that we were discussing. Great. So, that I think you have done lots of experience, like in terms of management and other stuff. And like more recently, I mean, you became a department chair at like computer science department at the University of Maryland. This is, I mean, a top 10 school. Like, we have very great people here. So I think I want to, and this is actually interesting thing. This is, I mean, you have recently also been an Amazon scholar, I mean, like maybe for a year or two as well. So you have also done, I mean, some work at Amazon, and you had a startup for a long time. I think these are some of the things that the people will be interested to know that. And one thing that I have seen it like being, so I think for the people, for the audience, this is important. So there are in the universities, in some sense, it's a company as well. So there is hierarchies of like you have a boss, and I mean, like if a faculty, then you have a chair and dean, and then provost and the president of the university. So in some sense, you have the hierarchies. But at the same time, department is the place that lots of these things will happen at the department, and lots of this inspiration, lots of the work actually is done at the department level. So department usually have a very, I mean, high say in everything that they want to, I mean, that the university should do. And in that sense, being a department chair is like a blessing. At the same time, it's also a lot of work that you need to do that. And there is a difference between the companies, because yes, in companies also there is the same hierarchy. Generally, in university, in companies, it's the case that the higher ups decide who should be the boss, who should be the manager. Of course, they will consider your previous experience, etc. One thing that I was always happy, I mean, to be in a department in a university is that like who should be the chair is not the one that just higher ups is telling you. Generally, I mean, lots of schools, it is the case that the faculty in that department have a lot of, I mean, say in that who should be the chair. And this is much more democratic way. Sometimes this does not happen. That might be actually not a very good experience. And so that's the general idea. And generally, it is the case. There are like 2-3 people that will be selected by some kind of selection committee through the faculty. They should address the department before, I mean, these people, they should have a chance to address the department. And from at the end, from this set of people who want to be the chair, maybe 2-3 will be selected by the selection committee that will present it to the dean. And at that time, dean usually selects only from that 2-3 people that the selection committee has done it. So that is, in a sense, democratic process, yes, Dean has the final say that who should be the chair, but among those people who went through the selection committee and passed and got the confidence of the department. So that's the difference between universities and between companies. And I think that's very important because in that sense, a chair is somehow is responsible to both to the department and the dean, which I mean, some sense also maybe the companies, but here you have much more. I mean, like you need to get the trust of both of these things, both the dean and the department. I think that was some introduction I want to mention because I think maybe it's not mentioned that clearly in other places. And I had the experience, I mean, to be in different companies, and I think that's important to mention. Good. Now, how was your experience as a chair? So, what was your vision? I mean, when you started, why did you want to be the chair? Because you have been a great, I mean, researcher. Sometimes the people, if they are like doing just great at the research, they don't want to take responsibility because there's a lot of responsibility. And I think Ming mentioned how hard she's working. That was like one of the things that I was amazed that I think we had several like communications that we had it when she was the chair, and still even now. At something like 3 a.m. that we had some discussion over the emails or other things, and that was like really amazing. And one of the things that I really, I mean, liked about, I mean, the style, you're, I mean, going very precisely, read all the details, and that level of, I mean, going to the details is really amazing to me. Like again, considering the fact that you are also great scientist. And like people say, oh, maybe I should do it more my research than doing that. But you are doing all this, all of them together. Good. So given this introduction, I mean, I think you can say like, how was like your vision when you were the chair? Why did you want to be the chair? So what were the challenges essentially? What are the good practices and bad practices? That's something that you wanted to be good at it and you could still improve, or something that, I mean, you were good at it and yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So lots of questions. Let me think a sec.
So maybe, I mean, why did you want to be the chair at the beginning? So I mean.
Okay. So let's start why I want to be the chair. Okay. So I'm gonna be honest. So, you know, there are challenges of being a woman in STEM, and we haven't talked about that. And one of the biggest challenges of women being in STEM is all these issues related to representation. And it's a big issue most people don't recognize is the issue related to representation for women or any underrepresented minority group in STEM is the representation in service. And so I actually was a program manager for Army Research Office for a couple of years, for 2.5 years. A lot of people don't know that. And so I was running a pretty big research project and center portfolio when I was there. Started the computer science program at Army Research Office. I was the funding program chair, program managers. And so that was a service role in a way, but it was also a way to solve my two-body problem. But it, you know, but being a woman in STEM and also being in sort of leadership position when I was so young, it immediately threw me into sort of a lot of service role. And so I've done a lot of service. I was like chair of conferences and workshop for over 2 or 3 dozen of them. And that was a huge number. I serve on a lot of program committee. I serve on a lot of university committee, all the way up to like provost task force, because I was one of the few of my representation. And particularly the higher you go, the more rare you become. And so I do a lot of service role. And then one thing I knew is I don't want to be an administrator. Okay. I never wanted to be a department chair. That was an honest truth. And it's a lot of things, because it's when you are in all these service roles, you see a lot. I did not mind to be a conference chair or a program chair because it's like a service for your community. And generally speaking, being in a scientific community, running a conferences and being a program chair, it's much more scientific, and you are servicing your community. So I feel like that's a service role I don't mind to take on. But I did not want to be a university administrator, so I did not want to be a department chair. But what happened was in the early 2017, Professor Ramachalapa, somebody I respect, called me up. And he trying to convince me to apply for the department chair positions at University of Maryland. I told Rama, I said, look, Rama, I'm really comfortable at UNC. We have a lot of, over the year, we have a lot of chances to leave, but we love the simplicity of living in Chapel Hill. And we stayed there for 20 something years. So, I kind of told him, like, no, I'm not really interested at all. And he's like, well, Ming, think about it. And, he's like, you'll be great. And, we would love to have you here as colleague and collaborator. And Rama was always very convincing. So I was still not quite convinced, to be honest. But I just decided to kind of look at the department at that time, just out of curiosity, how the department has changed. I was I was invited for interview, way back, I think around 2008, for endowed chair position. But at that time it didn't work out because they only had one for me, wasn't there for one for Dinesh, and I did not think that was acceptable. And I think department found, the department also found other candidates, who I think are very, very qualified. But anyway, I was also here, but I always had a relationship with the University of Maryland. It's one place I know a lot. I have friends and colleagues that I know here. In 2012, I was actually here visiting again in the capacity of NSF regarding the major MRI grants, for which Amita was the lead PI. So a lot of people in the department came to know me that way. And then in 2015, again, I was the review panel chair for UMIACs. And so I came to know about UMIAC and the structures. I was a champion for UMIAC. I was, in fact, the one who wrote a significant portion of the report for UMIACs.
Yeah, so just one thing, I think, so some of these people may not know what is that essentially. So there's a CS department, and there's a UMIAC, it is like a research part of essentially the university that's doing lots of things in the computer science. It is for the University of Maryland.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right. So UMIAC as a vision, it's really, really, really grand. Okay. And the UMIAC staff were great, and are still great today. But UMIAC at its inception, it's an incredible vision. If you think about the time when it was being formed, it's really designed to be a research institute focused on computational studies, but with interdisciplinary connection to other disciplines. So in the early days, for someone to have that vision and that concept of multi and interdisciplinary research is incredible. That's an incredible vision, and I'm very supportive of that. And that was a huge, huge attraction, to be honest. Was one of the attractive features of Maryland when we were actually considering later on as an option. So I haven't gotten to the point where how that switched my mind when I actually decided to apply. So UMIAC was later on definitely a key point of why we are here. But the key point of my changing my mind to interview Maryland was because of all my prior experiences, and I know a lot of great faculty here at Maryland. But when for whatever reason, around January 2017, I kind of I was just kind of curious, how is the department looking like? And why are they looking for external chair? So I remember just sort of kind of look it up. I'm always curious, right? So I'm kind of nosy. I was curious. So I said, what's going on in Maryland? So I look it up, and all the great women faculty I used to know are no longer, they were no longer here. And I remember instinctively, something was going wrong there. And I remember instinctively, no, I don't want to be there. It's a very toxic environment if all the senior women are gone. And, you know, that was my like instant reaction. And then there later on, there was this nagging voice, right? That just kind of tell me, like, after what I have gone through and after what I have seen, if I just run away from problems and not doing anything about it, even though I'm in the position to do something about it, then I'm worse than the people who are contributing to the problem.
So that's the time that you decided that you want to actually become the department chair, given that knowledge about the department.
Right. So that was exactly why I say, okay, you know, why don't you give it a try and see if you can actually do something to change the climate, to do something, you know, different. And that actually was a time when I actually, you know, I have 2 daughters. Okay, I have 2 daughters. So that was really the time that when I decided, no, yeah, I'm gonna give it a shot and then see what happened. You know, and it was just sort of like giving it a shot. And I was very lucky. You know, my understanding is the faculty voted. I was one that received some of the top votes. I was lucky enough to receive one of the top votes, and I'm very honored and privileged to have served.
Yeah. So in some sense, I mean, this, I mean, factor, I mean, essentially that knowing the minority situation at the university, one, I think that was a key factor in your decision that you want to come up and help the thing. Now, what are the challenges? Like, I think I don't remember, like, I have been at the University of Maryland for the past 12 years. I don't remember whether we had any women as the chair or not. Did we have anything? I think you have some of this knowledge better than us. I think you were the first person, like a first, like a scientist and a woman scientist that come and become the department chair. And so that's, I mean, there are some places other, like in US, that it is the case, not too many places. And so what were the challenges? So, and you have done some of this administrative work before, so it was, you were not new to this one. Mm-hmm. So, like, I mean, so, and also this one, we try to also be more positive in a sense that, like, if someone else wants to do that, someone hears that, what are the challenges that he or she probably can expect when he wants to become the department chair? I think these are important to know because these are some of the things that we discuss more. I'm not so sure that I have seen anywhere. That would be a great thing for the people who want to know more about.
Right, right. So, you know, when I decided I would take the position, as I already mentioned, that UME was definitely attractions, and there's also, even though as much as we enjoy UNC Chapel Hill, it doesn't have a college of engineering. So there were definitely the School of Engineering here. It's another reason, but also it has so many other institutes and focuses. So being here, you know, there was all these like collaborations that really excited me. Okay, other than just the possibility I can do something. And the funny part is, and there were faculty in the department that have areas that excited me so much. I wrote like the longest email I ever had after an interview to tell them how excited I was about the potential of collaborating them on these different projects. And I still remember that. And I actually don't usually do that at all. But it was, you know, I actually did that once. And I would say, however, being a department chair and being an administrator can be a really hard job when you have all these challenges. So what are the challenges? Some of them are really kind of specific, I think, to Maryland. And I'm not sure this is, it may be generally true across the US in different computer science department. So first of all, when you go into the place where you are the singular minority in every single regard, it's it's very, very difficult because there are obviously people who think differently than you do, have a very different perspective. So I do have to work with some of those faculty members or staff, and it takes time to really kind of iron out all the detail with faculty and to some degree of also I did not encounter as much problem with all the staff. There may be one or two staff who are like that, but generally speaking, you know, there were also a very, very small number, a minority, and when I'm saying it's, you know, small, it's like couple, and largely I found the faculty in the department to be super supportive, super nice, very really a pleasure to work with. But the couple people who have these biases can be very vocal, and you know, they can be very, and in the worst situation is if they are in very key powerful position, can be very difficult to work with, and that's a challenge. That's really a challenge, which I did not anticipate it, because you know, a lot of development happened, I did not know ahead of time, you know, happened after I arrived. So it was difficult and it was challenging. All you take is a couple very, very difficult faculty who have very strong biases, or a couple staff that have very strong biases, but they are in the powerful position that you have to work with. Some of that.
Sorry, just one thing. So I think the idea that, I mean, here we try to, I mean, like, essentially give these ideas for the people. I mean, we don't want to, I mean, we don't name anything as we discussed before, but we want to give the general challenges. So the general challenge, I mean, one of the things that I understand is like the case that you will come, and there are, of course, I mean, some people who have been there, like, I mean, opposition, they might be right in something, they might be not wrong, they might be wrong in some other things. And like, I mean, person that you were coming, I mean, from the minority background, that becomes probably more challenge, because I think you need to have more confidence in your, I mean, things, and these are not always, these are the things that you expected, and might be not that nice, and I think you should be just strong enough to go through them and try to do something.
Right. And you know, it's, I don't know if I should say this, right? There is a perception regarding an Asian woman, and when you don't fit that perception, people push back really hard. And you know, particularly for Asian women, I think this is really an issue. And I think this is true for any minority. This is true for any minority, no matter what. But let me put it that way. It is still great to actually have work with our faculty, and overall, it has been really, really rewarding. I would say, you know, there is no better way to move into a new institute and being a department chair at the same time, because it gives you so much insight and information and perspective regarding what was going on in the place. So I really actually really value that experiences, good or bad. It's what I learned, and it's how I get integrated very quickly into a new environment. But I would say the challenges is also the chair need to represent the department, but the chair needs to interface with administration as well. And there's always this tension. This is true for any department chair, not me, right? That you have to somehow work with upper administration and the department. And the unique challenges for the CS chair, this is true for all CS chair. I would say this is true, particularly probably for Samir as well. And I'm very grateful to him for all the work that he has done for, you know, helping fundraisings for the department, and being the department chair, I see how difficult it is, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we are back. Sorry, after 1 hour, it just disconnects us. This is the same thing with Zoom and Google Meet. And I think we are discussing that one thing that we had it always, I talk with me, that if we want to talk, that would be hours and hours. I mean, some of this is the things that two faculty, they are discussing. So these are some of the discussion that you can see. I think that's a good experience. If you want to become a faculty, that is type of things that you will see, and this type of discussion. Now, okay, so we were talking about, I mean, being a chair of the department. These are, I mean, when you become, like you are from minority group and you become the chair, there might be more opposition. And we try to, I mean, don't mention the names here. We try to, I mean, mention more about the experience, such that it is useful. I mean, of course, I mean, the experience part of that is the history. So we may discuss about the history, but again, without mentioning the names. And I mean, such that if a person wants to take this position, I mean, like especially for a minority, it would be great to know about it and see what's going on, and that would be great experience that Ming is sharing with us. So, okay, so I think we were talking about the challenges, and you mentioned some of this. I think you may want to continue.
Right, right. So, you know, other than being a minority chair, there's also just general challenges for being a computer science chair overall. Computer science, as everybody knows, is one of the most, you know, sought after degree. And Maryland, like everybody else, we have double the number of applicants to our major in just 1 year, from about 3,500 to about 7,000. And, you know, and we are also a top university, but we have put in a limited enrollment program to cap the growth, or at least on paper, since 2019. And part of the reason is the resources doesn't follow the students. Then that's one of the biggest challenges, because generally speaking, university have a budget allocation that's relatively fixed. It doesn't grow with the number of students. And this, you know, they follow sort of the most of the university does this, do this by following what's called an incremental budget. So when you have these explosive growth where the department student, you know, major size have changed, essentially or grown by a factor of 3 in less than 5 years, the department has difficulty coping with it. And so this is sort of the similar kind of challenges I had to deal with as the former chair had to deal with it, is how do you represent a department? The number one things I think any department chair should remember is they are here to represent the faculty, the students, and the staff's interests, not their own. And I also happen to be a strong believer of a democratic process and, you know, seeking consensus among faculties. And I also believe in transparency. And it doesn't necessarily, it's the way that all the administrator wants to, you know, necessarily agree on, for good reason, because it's very difficult to seek democratic consensus. And so that's definitely, you know, a challenge when you have a very constrained budget environment, and then you still want to respect the democratic process.
Yeah, so I think just as so some of the challenges that I got it so far, I think to just summarize, essentially, I mean, when you come as a minority, of course, there are some kind of opposition, I mean, because of any background or some strong voices that they may not agree with you. That's one thing. The other thing that we had it for CS is in general is that we have, I mean, because we are also a public university, and I think we are unique in that sense, we may have even the largest computer science undergrad. We have a huge number of undergrads. That's a very big thing, essentially, to deal with. And that has been doubled like in a year. That's like a huge thing to handle. At the same time, this is the budget issues, because again, we are a public university, our budget did not double during this time. So we need to consider that. And last but not least, also, I think it is important that, I mean, what's your belief to become a chair? If you are, I think, like, if you believe that you want to do it in a democratic way, always it will be even more challenging. Because I think in the long run, that will be beneficial for you, but in the local time, it might be the case that this is not, I mean, more challenges are coming. Any democracy has lots of problems, as we all know. But in the long run, I believe actually in democracy, and that's the best way to go. So these are like the 4 things that I got it from your time. And actually, this is one interesting thing. I always say that there was a discussion at Netherlands, they wanted to have a new king, and that king actually was a pilot and didn't want to be the king. And that was, I said that you should push actually for that person to be the a king, because you want to put a person as a chair that he or she does not necessarily want to be that person. Of course, he should have, or he or she should have the capabilities to do so. But it should be not the case that you want to be the chair because you want to be the boss. That does not seem good to me, because that's exactly against this type of democratic way that you should run it, and we expect that it's run for the university. So that's essentially some summary of the thing that we discussed. We are talking with Professor Ming Lin. I mean, she's a professor, I mean, with lots of awards at the University of Maryland, and she has been the department chair, and we are talking about the challenges for a chair person. Go ahead. Anything you want to add, other things?
Yeah. I mean, I think you summarized it very well. Those are really sort of some of the key challenges. But I would also like to say, there are some really rewarding experiences. I have always viewed from the very start that when I accepted to be the chair of the department, that I recognize chair is a service role. And I want to say this really, really cute story. There is a faculty in our department. I'm sure he is not going to mind I mention his name. That's Bill Gassarge. I don't even remember which day. And he said, "Happy Boss Day." And I say, "No, Happy Boss Day. I'm here to serve you." And really, that's my view. My joke is, the definition of chair, literally, physically, it's an artifact. It's an artifact that you sit on. So a chair is to serve, and so I have this view that chair, like any other administrative role, should be a service role. And if necessary, we need to recognize a service role sometimes require self-sacrifice. And this is not just true for chair. I think in my view, any administrative role should have that spirit. And so I feel privileged and honored to have served. And it can be really rewarding. One of the most rewarding experiences is to be able to hire our new faculty for the future. And, I try to facilitate a hiring in the most democratic way as much as I can, because I believe we are hiring our future colleagues and we are building the future for the department. So I was very happy to have participated in that process. And I'm happy to be able to assist in any way I can. And, because it's my personal belief that our work environment is also an environment, and we should protect our work environment just like we protect our physical environment. And so I am happy to have taken, parts of that process. I'm an environmentalist. And, I have also vision regarding why I wanted to be here, other than be able to make a difference in terms of, diversity of representation. But I also believe that computing is becoming an integral part of our life in every single aspect. But US as a country are not particularly good at really thinking about the policy implications, and also, how to really promote technology in a way that's actually going to help technology to serve for the societal good. And near Washington, D.C., Maryland, in my view, in my biased view, has the best computer science program in the region. And so we are well positioned in a very unique way to really serve in building this area into what I call the cyber valley of the East Coast, or the cyber valley of the US on the East, just like the Silicon Valley, of the 70s and 80s on the West Coast. We could do the same on the East Coast. So that was always my vision, another vision for the department. And I think the department is well positioned to take that leadership role to really help building up what I call the cyber valley of East Coast. And that was why I also believe in the connection with industries. And I think for, for really a healthy development and to sort of promote this kind of movement to encourage collaboration between industry and academia, it's not necessarily a mindset that everybody has. And it's particularly challenging in a science college because a science college has a more traditional science mentality. So that's also part of the challenge.
Great. Okay, so let me ask me a few questions to have short answers. I think, like as a department chair, I think that is important to answer that. That might be useful. So I mean, just maybe we want to have the short answer, but we have some other discussion that we can talk about. We want to talk about the research. So if you, I think maybe like you have been at Amazon, I mean, for a while and at the department. What's the difference between? I think I mentioned some difference between manager there versus department chair. Mm-hmm. Can you say one or two main difference between these two?
Yeah,
would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, Amazon, like any other tech company, I spend time at Amazon. I spend time. I mean, right now, of course, it's much more expensive. But I also spent a few months at Microsoft before. I spent, a couple of summers at Intel research before. And so I see the culture differences. I have consulted for different companies over the years. And so generally speaking, industry, the managers, it's much more top down. They make decisions often, with input from others, but they make singular decision. And also the company, generally speaking, are run a more bottom line driven, meaning they really are looking at sort of, the profit and what's good for the company, which is not necessarily good for the people who work there. So that's emphasis on individual, more on the bottom line of interest to the company. So this is what I see, I think, a bit different than the general academic environment. Now, of course, if we have governing structure that is closer and similar to industry, academia, you might start seeing a lot of people leaving. And that's, usually when any units that are losing a large number of people, it's an indication that the management could be too authoritarian, and that drives out of people. And that's my belief. And I have seen that for sure.
I think you, from the point that you mentioned. So one thing is that, I mean, like in the, I think we discussed that, like from the company, it is more top down. At the university is more like bottom up. That's right. The thing they are doing that. So that's one difference. And that is another thing actually I have noticed it is important. That when you are at a company, one of the things that we discuss, the manager generally asks just very brief. I have lots of responsibility that I need to do. And just be very brief, mention the main things. And as you mentioned, the whole idea is that you want to make the profit for the company and promote yourself. I think that is quite reverse, I will say, in the department. We don't believe in this kind of short discussion. Lots of this discussion that we have, it maybe, felt, somehow boring with some other outside people. But actually, these are necessary because these are the things that we try to listen with each other. It's not the case that I will just come and just give you the final thing that whether I have done it or not and what are the things. We need to discuss such that we can develop ideas, because these are like we train the students, we teach them, and these discussions are really necessary to understand that this is quite different from the company environment, that they want everything to be very brief and just to the point and don't talk anything after. That's not the case essentially in like the department, which is quite different in that sense. So I think that is one thing, and I think you mentioned some other differences as well. So that again, we try, like in some sense, all customers are the students that we are, that we are teaching, and we try to, make sure that they get the best gain from their study at the university, which is different from the profit of a company. It might
right.
be
So I do want to say something about Amazon, which I like. Okay. Amazon have a philosophy. It's about customer obsession.
yes.
Okay. And I have to say, as an Amazon customer, and actually having worked there, the concept of a customer obsession is great, because I wish we adopt a similar kind of attitude and spirit right here in the university. If we think that we have this obsession about how to promote our students, who is our customer. I actually use this term to, I don't know, in one of the conversation, and it just kind of popped up. And the student's like, nobody ever thought of me as a customer. That was his reaction. And he's like, I wish all my faculty would think of me as a customer. And that was his response. And I you know, like I say, we were just chatting and just joking. And I never, ever imagined a student would respond to me that way. And I realized this is sort of kind of the attitude that, you know, when it comes to resources allocation, we forgot that the tuition were being paid by the students or their parent, you know, their family and their parents, and some of their parents are struggling family and they deserve better. So I think that customer obsession is an attitude that we could benefit in an academic environment.
I completely agree. That's actually one of the things that I have used this word a lot, and it's a very useful actually word to use it. At the same time, actually, this is the issue that I had it like at Amazon, because one other interesting thing here, like as I mentioned, the difference between the universities and companies is that, like at universities, lots of faculty, they have a tenure to the department. In some sense, chair or dean or others, except, I mean, for some, I mean, like really huge, I mean, bad things happens or like crime or something like this, they cannot fire them easily. That is quite different from the university. Like at Amazon, I mean, this is PIP culture or PIP culture that if your manager is not happy with you, they can put there and they can fire you. Like in a month, they can fire you. And that happened. So there is no such thing. In that sense, the people have more power. Because they have more power, like department chairs or others, they may hopefully care more about the faculty, but maybe less about the customer. In this case, we are a student. At Amazon, that is something in reverse. I mentioned actually in some talk there that actually the customer, they will talk about customers, but for example, for them, Amazon Finance is also a customer for them. So they have a customer, they have Amazon Finance, they have a customer, they have advertisers as a customer, they have lots of customers. One of the things that unfortunately I have seen it at Amazon is that they don't consider their employee. So their employee, they don't consider it as a customer. That's one of the issues. I mean, the issues that we have seen it, and I mean, there's lots of things that you may hear about Amazon. And I think that is important that your employees also, they are your customers, and you need to take the best care of them. And that's again something that might be different between the companies. And I think it's not just Amazon, all other things that in some sense they don't consider, like when you talk about customers, actually your employees also are the customers, and I think you should care about them as well. This is like somehow the reverse that somehow it happens in universities. Good. So one other thing, so like another, like a quick question. So if a person, I mean junior person, want to apply for a faculty, like you got a graduate, your PhD, and you want to apply. So what is the most important thing? Like, so I just want to add one thing. At universities, again, when we want to hire a faculty, generally the department votes for that person. Lots of universities is the case that the final say is with the chair. Of course, chair try to consider the decisions of the department, but at the final say is by chair. So you have been the chair, and there are some faculties who applied and they want to get a job. So what are like the advice that you have like for them? What is the most important things that they should prepare if they want to get a job?
Okay. So first of all, I mean, at least for me, I don't make the final decision on hiring at Maryland. The final decision resides with the dean. But you know, having interviewed for a lot of candidates, and generally speaking, my recommendation is based on the faculty votes. I just pass on the faculty votes. The decision is really by the dean. But my experiences and my observation is there is one advice I would give to all the PhD students who are seeking for job is you should ask yourself, what are the most important thing about your first job that you are looking for? Do you have any personal constraint? Do you any have geographical preferences? Do you have, you know, I mean, because we are all human and we have our life, and there are some really strong preferences. I always had a strong personal preferences regarding where I want to live. So those matters. My strong personal preference is what led me to pick Berkeley over MIT. Sorry, I know you're an MIT graduate, but but I picked Berkeley over MIT. Yeah, but you know, and so those are important because anywhere you're gonna be, it's gonna be at least for, may not be for life, but at least for a few years. Then the next question you should ask yourself is, what would be the what would be the places like that's going to be most nurturing and it's going to help me grow as a researcher and as a young researcher particularly, and what, you know, who am I going to be collaborating with, and you know, what's the environment like that's going to help me thrive as a junior faculty. So those are the kind of questions I would ask. And obviously we're including students and colleagues and, you know, just general environment.
Yeah, so I think one important thing, like when you are a faculty and you want, I mean, you apply as a PhD student to get a faculty position, you need to get first the interview. So I think in that sense, that is another interesting difference between academia and industry. Actually, in industry, it might be easier to get interviews comparing to the one that it happens, for example, in academia. Like in academia, if you get the interview, it's a very good chance. I mean, the chance of that you will get the job is much higher. Lots of people may not reach actually the interview point. So what would be the best way to get the interview? Should you ask your advisor to send an email to department chair or the faculty in the new department? Do you find it useful or not useful? I think this is a question that, I mean, the people, I had it actually sometimes. Some people actually advise me both ways. So how do you feel about it?
Being a department chair and being a Democratic department chair, I would say don't buck the department chair because I think the biggest champion, it all depending on the culture of that department you apply to, right? And I think I'm pretty democratic. I think that the candidate will be much more effective if the candidate wants to have their faculty advisor contact any of the faculty. It should be faculty closest to their area, and also potentially they, you know, whether it's necessary or not, I don't think it would hurt. But I think a lot of it, it's just going to be the chemistry and the interaction when they interview with the faculty at that particular location. And as I already mentioned, like you want to ask yourself, you know, who are going to be my mentor and who are going to be my collaborator? Who can I collaborate with? And if you approach your interview from that angle and that lenses, and you know, and that comes out both way during the interview, will be probably the most helpful. Certainly, you know, the advisor's call wouldn't hurt, because I know as advisor, when we have graduate students applying, any advisor who actually go out of their way and make personal recommendations that are very specific, I will look at a graduate student's application more carefully.
I think.
Right.
So important, I think at industry, if you want to do the interview, generally it is important that somebody refers to you. So in some sense, I mean, your advisor can refer you to the department. So that doesn't hurt, I will say. That's maybe, yeah. I mean, the conclusion for this thing. So like another interesting thing, like if you have you had this issue also before, if you have a two-body problem, should you mention at the beginning or at the end? That's also some.
I think it depends. I think it depends on the situation. I don't think there's a general rule of thumb. You know, I know we are not supposed to ask from our side in terms of you know, people who are hiring. But if your two-body problem is pretty serious, and depending on what your second body, your spouse or your significant others does, you may or may not wish to mention it because that's critical. And I know also there are couples, for them, the two-body doesn't necessarily have to be co-located. So, you know, it all depends. I mean, I think this is a question of how important it is for you.
Yeah.
And really, I don't want to make a broad stroke recommendation. Yeah, it's case by case. It varies a lot depending on what each one of you do. So I don't think there is any kind of like penny ceiling to the two-body problem.
Great. So, and one other, related question that actually some of the, people ask is that, like, when do you think that, like, when you are a grad school or maybe even undergrad, you want to decide whether you want to graduate a school, to become a professor or you go to industry. Like, what are the criteria that you may decide? Again, short answers.
Again, I think that's very much individual, right? And all of us can change our mind anytime. And honestly, I never thought I want to be a professor. And I did work outside, in industry, in the research labs. And it was during my experiences of working for research labs, I decided I want to go to academia because it seems to me, at least at that time, I will have more freedom to pursue what I want to do. It was not so much a salary. It was very much about freedom to pursue what I want to do, the direction I want to go. And I still believe that being academia, you will have more freedom to pursue what you would like to have. What you want to pursue for your research and what you want to teach, generally speaking. And that's provided. There is one joke from one of my former colleagues at UNC, vision without resources is just an illusion. And so, if you're an academic and you have your vision regarding what you want to pursue, you have to get your resources. And getting resources, it's not always fun. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of haggling and it's a lot of hassling. And I think that's something not everybody understand when they go into academia. And that's something to kind of keep in mind as well, is, nothing come for free.
Great. I think two things I think I got it from your talk and also our discussion, that I think two things important. If freedom in terms of doing the thing that you want to do, and at the same time, like being like going to more democratic way, I think that's actually going to academia is a good path. If money is the main things, and you want to do, maybe, yeah, I think money is the main things. That might be the case that industry might be the best thing. Definitely, being a faculty is not the best place to make money. But in terms of freedom or freedom and democratic way of deciding about it, that would be a great place actually to be. So that's some of the conclusion that I have. Great. So I think anything that you want to add about like the chair or others, we want to go more about the research, talk a little bit about the research as well.
I think we can go more about the research.
Yeah, I think we can go at the end, we can add something like that. Great. So, okay. So, you were working essentially on robotics type of things, motion planning is part of it, as you correctly mentioned it. You also work both on the theory side and I think maybe more system side. I think that was also, as you mentioned, now I understand better from your undergrad versus grad somehow came. So, good. So, given that, first, how do let's talk a little bit. Do you hear me? Yeah.
Yes,
okay. So, let's talk a little bit about, some of the areas that you are working are robotics. I think we can talk more and we will continue next time. I think we finish as well. And the other one is like physically based modeling and animation. So do you want to connect them? Talk a little bit about the robotics. What are the challenges? What are the things that you are working?
Right. Right. Okay. So robotics is a very interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary area. And that's one of the reasons why I work in robotics. You know, it's a branch of computer science, particularly on the algorithmic side, but it also involves engineering. And, you know, robotics really kind of include like design, prototyping, simulation, constructions, you know, and use of robots in or autonomous systems or autonomous agents. So robotics is very, very broad. And that's what really was attractive for me when I was trying to decide on the area. I always think of the goal of robotics. It's not a technology itself, but is to sort of design systems and artifact that's going to assist human. And, you know, traditionally, I think there is like this phobia regarding robots, like how the robot going to steal jobs. And I really don't never ever see that way. I see robot is like assistance to us, right? And and they really augment our intelligence and amplify what our capabilities. So I see robotics is a service to the humanity. And, and that's the attraction for robotics, at least for me. I think there are different areas of robotics that a lot of people may or may not be aware of, but you know, some of the really foundational area, including like motion planning, manipulation, locomotion, sensing, perceptions, you know, human robotic interaction, grasping, simulation, kinematics, control, optimization, you know. And robotics, by the way, in a more recent day has, like, if you go to any robotics conference, it's all about machine learning, tons of learning-based algorithm for all these algorithmic foundation of robotics. I work on the more algorithmic side, less on the hardware side, partly because of my graduate school training. So a lot more on the algorithm, formal analysis. And it is related to another area, which I do a lot of research, you know, because a lot of people like you work in robotics and you also working like AR, VR, and computer graphics. How are they related? And my response is they are related, because one of the things I really focus on, as I mentioned, I'm more on the CS side. So I focus on a lot. How do you map a natural phenomena into a computer simulated program? And, you know, and basically there are like two major steps of this mapping process. One of them is the mathematical modeling of any kind of physical system or dynamical system. And the other one is the, you know, it's the numerical simulation or the numerical solution. So again, that's the modeling and the simulation aspect. It's very critical. And this is what you have to do anyway for robots in terms of prototyping and designs in the computer. And that's kind of where they link. I also work on motion planning. And the motion planning problem is just the general idea of how do you design an algorithm, a computational algorithm to go to do certain tasks. So, you know, a simple example would be path planning. How do you go from point A to point B? Another example would be, how do you pick up something? Another example would be, how do you tell the autonomous vehicle how to drive on the road and avoid all the obstacles, right? So, you know, or how do you insert a soft surgical robot into the human body and go move toward the target tumor to, you know, to inject medicines. So those are sort of all examples. So robots, it's not exactly what people think as the traditional robot, right? It's not what we think of. The robot is very broad. You know, the car is a robot, the airplane is a robot, the drone is a robot, a molecule is a robot.
Anything that assists us in life, and it is not a, I mean, it's a, like it is not a live thing in some sense, that is a robot in some sense. Am I right? But anything that assists us in life, and it is not alive itself.
Yes, yes. You know, I think a robot is our perception of a robot, you know, like what we see in the movie, is a physical realization of the concept robot. But robot itself can be just simply an autonomous agent, right? So, you know, like it embodies a lot of concept on AI as well. And that's why traditionally AI and robotics are very well integrated. So in my view, a robot is very broadly defined in so many different ways. And you know, any intelligent agent lives in the physical world. It has the geometric representation that define its boundary in any shape and form. And it also is being, you know, its motion and its movement, it's also being governed by, you know, mathematical equations, any kind of geometric model, any kind of physical law, right? So it, you know, most of robots are not anti-gravity. So you know, to study robotics, you really have to kind of understand all these different aspects. And that's what robotics to me is so attractive and such a beautiful field to really study. But because robot is here to serve humans, right? It's not to run around and does its own thing. Then the interaction between human and robot and that interface become critical. And I think we don't have a lot of understanding. We have a lot of fears. As a society, I would say we have strong phobia against, you know, automation in general, and particularly robots. And I think some of the challenges as we go and move forward into the future is to really think about some of these challenges of how the robot or machines or a computer interact with human. So I really believe in sort of human-centric autonomy. You know, I mean, it's kind of like an oxymoron term because autonomy meaning it's autonomous, but yet it's human-centric because you have to have the human in the loop, no matter how autonomous the agent will be. Because we are designing these computer programs, these intelligent agents to serve the human, not to serve the system by itself and not for the technology's sake.
Great. So good. So I mean, I think for robotics, there are, I mean, the physical item that is the robot and it's not a live thing. There are algorithms and these are machine learnings. Mm-hmm. Is there any other things that, I mean, what are the important components?
Right. And so I kind of mentioned, you know, for robotics, like planning is always a really important component. This planning could be very low level planning, like how to manipulate an object, how to grasp an object, how to pick up an object, or how to make a robot move. But it could also be very high level, which is very behavioral and which touch a lot of, you know, AI concept, reasoning, like how does a robot reason? How does a robot think like a human? How does a robot plan its action? Like playing chess, playing games, solving maze, solving solutions, you know, like thinking, computational thinking, right? So that is a high level planning, very, very high level planning. Then a different aspect is also sensing and perception. So the robot has to have a way of taking input from the world around them. And usually the world around them is the physical world. So computer vision here is important, but also other domain. Like how do you process audio signal? How do you process speech? How do you process tactile information? So I also work in audio. I also work in haptics. One of the areas I haven't worked on is speech, but I recognize its importance. And I've been doing a bit of vision. So all those are critical. Sensing and perception is critical because that's the input to any kind of autonomous system. So we need to think a little bit about those. And then again, HRI, the human robot interaction is really, really critical. And how to control the robot is also really critical. And when you need to control the robot, you need to take into account the various constraints. So optimization is going to be an integral part of any robotics program. And then
so I think also networking and wireless network is another one. So sometimes I think that the way that you put it, actually now I'm thinking, it's like intersection of all areas of computer science in some sense, and even some electrical engineering. All of them, they intersect in robotics, such that you have a successful robotics field. And these are the ideas from, I mean, any angle that might be actually relevant. So one question, I think this is like I think that this question, this is a book by Stephen Hawking that he's talking that at some point the robots might be too powerful that we cannot essentially, they can conquer human beings. So what do you think about it? So whether we go that way or not?
Well, I don't think that's a fear we need to worry about in the next couple decades. Is it possible? It's not out of question, but honestly, I think we have a very long time. We have a long way to go. And I think this is where sort of, science, ethics comes in, and policy that comes in as an important discussion, is, do we design technology for technology's good, or do we design technology for the goodness of humanity? And I don't want to say no, it's not possible, because I can foresee it's possible, but I think we have a long way to go before we hit that possibility.
So are there some kind of ethics, rules that we can put it that can avoid this?
Yes. Number one, democracy. Any final decisions on power, if you have ability to run something really, really powerful and have that much control and influences, any authority to exercise that power need to have a check system to ensure. So I don't think the technology itself is evil. It's usually how it's being used is evil, and really we have to have basically a check and balance system to ensure that no one would have that kind of abuse, or that have authority and powers to abuse the technology to that extent that it would actually harm others. So that's my view, and this is where I think, if we have a good check and balance system, we can avoid that.
Yes, I think the democracy is the one that put the correct check and balances such that possibly avoid it. But again,
right.
This is
and I want to say this, right? I think it's very critical that if we always ask this question, can a technology be abused? Let me just simply say, there are a lot of people who have power, abuse their powers, and cause great devastation without the technology. And I hope people remember that, right? So most of the time, technology is here to serve. So any human can take anything, even a simple policy can hurt so many people. And to fear that the technology will hurt people, so we never make progress, then you will be actually a detriment to the humanity, because we are developing all these technology for the goodness of humanity and society. So I think what we need to put in check is much more a check and balance system than to worry about, we should not develop this technology, or we should not develop robotics, or we should not develop even the first computer to start with, because we so fear that someone else is going to abuse it. The fact is, someone else is going to abuse it. It can abuse so many other tools and cause great harms. Dictator exists for decades, centuries before any technology. A lot of people die for one or two people's decision. So I think we need to keep things in perspective when it comes to this kind of discussion regarding the implication of technology in the society. We need to think it's not a technology that's at fault. Right? It's really one or two individuals that's causing the great harms.
Yeah, I think, to me, again, this is maybe too simplistic, but one important thing, some of these rules, ethics, is that you should have this power button for any robot that you are creating. Because, there should be something that you can turn it off. Of course, this actually, it happens sometimes that I have a computer, I cannot turn it off, actually.
Have you ever seen a computer that cannot be turned off? No. All artifacts need energy to power it. We have not designed. The reason I have faith that there is nothing nearby, it's gonna no technology gonna take over the world. so far, all technology require energy systems. There is no energy system is going to self-sustain without some sort of replenishing, right? And so there is no infinite energy to support a machine to keep working and going forever. And this is the number one thing to kind of keep in mind. So as long as we have, you know, some sort of check and balance, there is no computer going to run on itself without the electricity. There is no robot that's going to run on itself. It needs to be recharged every few minutes, every few hours. Our electric car needs to be charged after X number of miles. So, you know, I mean, yeah, the energy is the control.
That might be the best power that we have for robots, at least for a while. So another thing, so I think you mentioned about the motion planning. So like, what's the difference between motion planning and autonomous driving? I think that's one of the areas also that you are working. So like, what is the difference between these two? Are just autonomous driving is just next step of motion planning?
Autonomous driving is much more than motion planning. Motion planning is really only looking at how do you plan the motion and take an autonomous agent to perform a certain task, right? And it's not just about going from point A to point B, avoid all the obstacles. It's also to execute a task. Autonomous driving, it's much more complicated. Autonomous driving need to have a sensing technology and a perception module. So it can process all the information around the, you know, around the physical world where it's currently located. So you need to have computer vision. You need to be able to process all the information. You need to be able to predict. And you also need to be able to plan and need to be able to follow the traffic rules, any kind of constraints, you know, and be able to sort of somehow avoid unexpected obstacle that you may or may not have learned how to adapt to. So autonomous driving is much more complicated, and obviously it needs to be a system that can interact with human.
And do you think that, I mean, we will have this kind of autonomous driving that I can essentially sit a real one? I have been actually, I can say that back in, I think, 2017, I was in one of these Uber cars that at that time they mentioned self-driving. So there was it, and I was like part of, I mean, the visit that I had it. And this person, I mean, the driver, they said it is autonomous driving. What the person was putting essentially hand around the wheels like this. And as soon as something goes wrong, it just take it the control.
Right.
That does not seem to me, I mean, essentially like autonomous driving. Something that, I mean, we have just self-driving cars. Do you think, are we close to that? Or, I mean, we are far from that?
Let me put it that way. Of all the technology, I think that, you know, there's a lot of hype about currently. Autonomous driving is probably closest to being used. In fact, it is a lot of derivative from autonomous driving is already used. And, you know, like cruise control is one of them. You know, we recently bought a Tesla because we want to experience sort of components of autonomous driving, and it's pretty amazing as owner of a Tesla. I would say, yeah, it's pretty amazing. There are a lot of components, all the computer vision, sensing, perceptions, handling, you know, being able to detect collisions, be able to see things that human eyes don't typically see. It's great. I mean, or don't typically pay attention to. It's great. So I think it improved the safety. But a lot of autonomous vehicle also allow the human to take over, and this is where the HRI issue need to be kind of, you know, further research on, because the human can overreact, and if God forbid something happen, you always have this question: is it technology or is it a human? So I think autonomous driving will be here, and if it's not already here. Actually, I think a lot of different components of technology that go into autonomous driving are already being used. A lot of people just may or may not recognize that. So I think autonomous driving is already here. The question there is full autonomy, meaning no human driver whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's possible, but the problem is, a lot of companies are very concerned about the legal issues. and a liability issue. So they don't want to just let it loose. They are worried about, if you have an accident, who is responsible for it? They are very concerned about the eco issue. They're very concerned about liability issue. But just going from point A to point B on highway autonomously, I believe the technology is already here today. Okay.
Great. Okay. So also one thing that you are doing, the virtual try-on. Can you talk a little bit about it? I think that's one other research area that you are working on.
Yeah. So I work on virtual try-on. I've been working on that area for a few years now. And, I started this research in this area with one of my PhD students, Shan Yan. She was at Google Research for a few years, and she just recently joined Amazon as well, but in a different group, visual search. But, my view, I don't exactly like shopping. And, trying clothes is always a frustration, can take a lot of time. So, and during COVID, as many people already know, that it's hard to go out and go shopping. And for whatever reason that we are constrained from going shopping, and you want to go online and shop for clothes. And, survey has shown 70–80% of customers return clothes because they don't fit. So always, when we started this project way back when I was still at UNC, is we want virtual try-on experiences, either online or on your computer, where you can pick any garment or any accessory you want, and you want to try it on your body, not anybody else's body, not a supermodel's body, your body, and see how you will look on you. And you would like to be able to see a friend in the back on the side view, as you walk or as you do any kind of, sports and exercise. So that's our vision, is to actually do a fit accurate 3D virtual try-on on your body. And so that involves a lot of interesting, challenging problems. One of them is, how do you reconstruct the body, your body, the customer's body? And then how do you get the digital representation of what you want to try and what you want to wear? Right? This could be a garment, this could be a pants, dresses, a tops, a jacket, anything you name it, shoes. And that's another challenge. That's a reconstruction problem. That's a classical reconstruction problem involving geometry, physics, and, sort of other things like visual appearance. So it's a classical problem, and it's really important problem, and it's really a hot problem right now in computer graphics and also in computer vision. And also in VR and XR. So it's
VR, you mean virtual reality?
Virtual reality.
Yeah.
XR,
and what was XR?
Huh?
What was XR?
XR refers to virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. So
I see.
A spectrum of the reality.
A spectrum of the reality. Great. Yeah, and I think this is somehow related to other questions. So these are I know that Amazon actually is spending a lot of, research in this area, because that for them is very important. I know they are using deepfake actually to produce lots of these people faces that you are doing are deepfake, because they don't want to be liable for the person of one person, for a picture of one person that they show. And that's actually interesting. I know some familiarity with the deepfake. That was also interesting thing, that at the deepfake, when you do that, at the end, the person that you will create, this is not a real person. But in some sense, it's very similar to one of the people that you have used it. In some sense, you didn't completely resolve the issue that, yes, maybe this person is not completely me, but it is based on me. So this is some of the challenges that exist. And still, so this idea, because you cannot, Amazon cannot just take shape of one person or picture of one person and then put it, and then put all try-on things that you mentioned on top of that. So in that sense, it's research things, we need to make sure that this person does not exist, and nobody can come and claim that this is my picture in some sense. And of course, then on top of that, you are using all this kind of virtual try-on, etc. Are you doing the same thing also, this type of problem at Amazon as well?
Okay, so I think I know what you're talking about. So there is a group in Amazon that is create what we call the virtual avatar. Yes. And the idea there is to create a virtual fashion model that may have a body kind of look like yours, but it's not you. And the reason is they want to respect privacy and confidentiality, and also they are concerned about security. So Amazon is very, very careful regarding security and privacy and confidentiality. Okay, so those are really big issue for Amazon. So they created this sort of very generic avatar that kind of it's approximate of you, but it's not you. I think that, you know, the verdict is out there for the customer to give us feedback, because the virtual try-on technology is very new, and there are several different roadmaps. Like the one I was talking about, you know, for in terms of virtual try-on, the approach we are taking is very much learning-based algorithm. We learn from simulation. So I mentioned earlier, we do a lot of physically based simulation. So we learn from simulation, and we learn from simulated dynamics to show you how the clothes will drape on your body. What we did find was a lot of customers have reluctance to actually have their body captured by photographs. And if we don't capture your body, we cannot tell you how the clothes will look on you. So that is still a roadblock for us to really provide, or, you know, Amazon to provide you a true 3D virtual try-on experience. That's why they come up in the near term to have these approximate avatar that kind of look like your body shape or approximate your body shape, and then you can see. And most of that technology is also image-based or vision-based. So it doesn't reflect how you would actually look on you. It's more like you have a 3D avatar will show how the clothes will look. Now, as a customer, I would say I would not be satisfied with that. You know, as a customer, I would want to see how the clothes will look on me, on my body shape. And we are, you know, inching and moving toward that you don't have to wear tight clothes to get your body captured. You can wear any loose clothes and still can get your body captured reasonably well. And we are definitely looking at like customers' confidentialities and, you know, security issues. I have to say, you know, of all the company I work on, Amazon is very, very tight about security and confidentiality at least.
Great. So, like I think just like finishing this part. So, what are the main research challenges? I mean, like in this kind of physical modeling, try-on. I think you mentioned some of them, and robotics. Like that's the one that, like, if somebody wants to do research, these are some important problems to think about.
Right. So, so I will start with the low-level challenge, and I'll talk about a big-level challenge. The low-level challenge is there's a lot of work on acquiring geometry, but not enough work on acquiring physical property. So there is also a lot of work on acquiring visual appearance, and again, not enough work about how the mechanics of different material and different bodies will interact. And material here, particularly for virtual try-on, it's the fabric. So I think that's going to be a challenge. How can we automatically acquire all these, you know, digital representations of fabric materials and also their appearance into a system? So, you know, we want to have an automated pipeline to do that. So that's a very specific challenge related to virtual try-on, and obviously how do we acquire the human body? I think our technology is getting better, and I foresee in the next couple of years we will address that challenge. But the bigger pictures is what I say is the reconstruction of the real world. That's going to transcend the boundary between the virtual and real, and this is the big vision in my view, related to the XR, is how do we take the real world and bring it into either a virtual reality or augmented reality or mixed reality environments. And this, when we look at the real world, it has all these complex geometry and physical property and mechanical property and behavioral models and phenomenon. How do we capture all those? That's the hard problem.
So we are it disconnects us. I think we will come back for, I think, the last part, and then I think. Yes. Hello everyone. So I try to get Professor Ming Lin here. Give me a few things. Yeah. I mean, sorry. Yeah, I think this is hopefully will be the last one. But yeah, so we were talking about this. I think the research challenges that you mentioned. So this kind of bringing this all this physical things that we see it in the real world, geometry, everything in the virtual world. That's the. I mean, and they make essentially virtual more similar to real world. I think that's the main things that uh, you mentioned as the main research challenge. So one other thing is that I mean you have also tried. I mean you had a startup. I mean that before joining Amazon. I think for several years. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what did you do? What are the obstacles there, especially again if you are like a woman and you want to do that? What are the obstacles for us startups or any person essentially wants to do that? What are the obstacles? Yeah, tell us more about that experience.
I mean, this startup was, in my view, sort of a success. The startup was formed when I was at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. A couple of the students were very interested in our research group, was very interested in taking their PhD dissertations and turn that into product. You know, so they were interested in sort of trying to explore those possibilities, and we were supportive, but to be honest, you know, it's not easy to be a professor and have a startup company, especially we have a relatively large group, but we want to be supportive, and ultimately, you know, a lot of things we do have a real world applications, and so Anish Chandak, who was the more senior PhD of the two, he sort of took it on himself, and we were very lucky to actually have worked with him. To actually, he learned a lot. He actually taken courses from our business school. He came from a business family, and when he asked for our support, we basically supported. So I would not say it's really our effort. It's really, you know, Anish's initiative that made it happen. He did a lot of groundwork to, you know, lay all these foundations, and we were there to support, to help providing context, to help providing connection, to help writing proposal. You know, someone asked me about our startup earlier, and I was very honest. This is, you know, where the government program really was very supportive. This company took off pretty much federal grants for small business, and also
SBIR type of things.
That's right. It's called, for those you know, for those students, PhD students or master students or just even undergraduate students who are interested. The federal government have really great program. It's called to encourage formation of small business, and that's called SBIR. And I knew about this when I was a program manager at Army Research Office, and it's really a great program, right? This is a federal government funded initiative trying to help small company to get started. SBIR initiative has already existed for decades, and it did actually help the creation of many small company. And so I have a lot of knowledge since I've been on the other side. And Dinesh was also involved. And the other student was Lakulish Antani. And again, both of them were former PhD students. They were interested in taking their PhD dissertation work into commercialization. We were supported. So we co-founded a company. The company was really focusing on the physically based sound synthesis, and really more on propagations, on audio propagations. And it will be like a standalone audio library and sound effect library to be integrated with any kind of game engines or virtual environments, or XR environments. And so that was our market. That was our target market.
Can you explain a little bit, maybe more like easier way to understand, like maybe less technical way?
Okay, so basically what this will do, what our company's product will do, is to automatically generate sound effect, an audio effect. So, if you have, the simplest way to think about is the sound waves are essentially a propagation of pressure wave through mediums. And so they propagate through the mediums. And generally speaking, the medium that we are talking about here is the air, right? And so if you have somebody who is coming behind, you will hear that person's footstep. So you know that person is coming behind. So if you are in a virtual environment, that's audio cue is critical. And so what we do is to introduce this kind of audio cue into your game environment, into your virtual environments, into any kind of 3D environment. So you can hear the sound just like you would in the real world. Another really important cue is a sound propagation or acoustic effect. When you are in a concert hall, you will hear the acoustic effect of the room. Same with the lecture hall. If you put a carpet, the sound may not propagate as well because it got dampened, right? So these are the audio effects we simulate and we model and we recreate. So you can experience the same audio effect or the sound effect as you would in the physical world, but also in your games, but also in your virtual environments. It's also important and critical for like teleconferencing, for example, so that you feel like the person that you're talking to is right next to you. So those are sort of kind of, what we've been kind of, that's what the company was specialized, and we have the best of the state of art at that time. The library was also running in real time, and this is extremely critical because all these are interactive experiences, and we want to be able to run, in real time. And that's what the company was for. And so other than SBIR, we also have government grants supported by STTR, which is a collaboration between university and small company. And again, this is for all those of you who are interested in starting your own company. It's a great programs by the federal government. And so at the very beginning, for the first couple of years, that's what, pays for the employees and the personnel. So we were very lucky. We have multiple grants, and we have, a lot of these, the initial years was all supported by these grants. The technology was great. Anish was great. Lakulish was great. They really took it, and they pushed it. We were certainly there to help them in terms of getting funding and writing proposal, but they were the one that really turned everything into reality. And we started having customers, real customers, who purchased our library, who signed contract with us. And so we actually have a portfolio of people who are actually using it, and we have games that were using it. And there are major game companies that use our technologies all over the world. So, and then eventually we got acquired by Valve. We also have filed a lot of patents, all supported by the company. Under University of North Carolina, under the University of North Carolina licensing. So the IP is owned by UNC Chapel Hill, but the patent was filed by the company. So this was a great collaboration from the small company associated with the university at UNC and UNC, because UNC now owns a whole bunch of patents because of these small company. And there was a Carolina license, express license that enable all this. So I would say, really being a minority did not hit us or impact us in any way, because everything just sort of kind of, it's kind of great. Everything just took off. The company was acquired by Valve in 5 years. And so we are very grateful. And 1 out of 10 small companies survived. And we were 1 out of the 10 that got acquired in less than 5 years. So I can't complain. It was a great experience. So I certainly we were lucky, but not everybody is that lucky.
Great. Okay, so that was a good thing. So that was, you are happy with that experience?
Right. It was really great.
Yeah, great. Good. Okay, so I think we talked about Amazon and also the startup that is, and I think that was interesting because this example that you mentioned for the company, it was exactly among the research challenges that you mentioned, how you can make the virtual world like the same as real world. And this like
Right.
footstep that you mentioned come from the back is one of these. Like now I'm thinking it's quite non-trivial actually. How can you make such a thing? That's actually the great things. I mean, some of the one that I like about these talks are exactly this. So there are some areas that I didn't know about it. Now I see actually it's a quite interesting area, quite challenging area. Great. So I think I think you mentioned that like in terms of like a startup, there was like as a female or I mean person or like as a minority, you didn't have any obstacle. You mentioned that when you were the chair, I mean, you may have some more obstacles on that one. Are there other obstacles that you felt like in your research environment, on your life, or others being minority? I think if you put it a little bit down, such that we will see you better, that would be better.
I'm sorry. I was trying to make sure my phone doesn't run out of power.
Yes.
Okay, so you know, well, let me put it that way, right? I mean, we are always being judged. We are always being judged by, in every single regard. We have peer review process, and it's, you know, there, you know, I mean, generally speaking, I think most of the people I work with has been great. And most of my peer has been very courteous, but occasionally I'll run into a strange situation, which I think are unusual. But generally speaking, it has been great. But you know, when people ask me what's the challenge of being female computer scientist, I would say, well, I can hang around the bar and drink with people. It's a very challenging way to socializing, and you know, socializing in our field is pretty common, and so I don't do that. So a lot of time when you collaborate, you form a bond, and you can't go out there and drink. That's something most, I think, female computer scientists wouldn't do. Another thing that I can think of is the peer review process would always have biases in there. And a lot of it is very implicit. I would say I have encountered something very explicit in some of the review comments I receive in the proposal review process. And there really isn't anything you can do, right? That just matter of life. But like I say, I think most of my peers has been extremely courteous. Other than that, you know, I'm trying to kind of think that, you know, there are definitely implicit biases, and there are all these sort of hurdles regarding socializing. I'm having difficulty kind of think what are sort of other things.
That's good. I mean, if you have a difficulty, that's a good thing. It means that hopefully there have been not too many difficulties, at least
Right.
like in the US.
Right. And you know, like I said, I mean, there is one more things which I observe, and I'm not sure how much of that is really a challenge, is the assumption if I'm not in my office, I must be at home. I mean, I literally have one of my colleagues say this to me, which is absolutely annoying. I don't think any man would ever say this to another man. You know, if you cannot do this for me, you must be sitting at home babysitting. And that I found it very repulsive, because I was at home writing 7 proposals that semester. And many of us, we all know in academia, we have to write a lot of proposals, we have to write a lot of papers. With COVID, many of us are working from home. So there is definitely stereotypical imagination, you know, that people have. But otherwise, I think, you know, I don't really see huge obstacles. Just the general stereotype, like what you would do, other people would not do. And the other one probably is more research area, which I observe. You know, there are certain research area that may be somehow viewed as more for women scientists versus the other. which I think is very unhealthy. It constrains what women can do, what women scientists can do. And that's generally speaking associated with a softer, what's being perceived as softer science. But other than that, like I say, I think generally speaking, I feel my colleague has been very, very supportive. I would certainly like to see more representations in the workplace. I think just about all minorities will feel much more comfortable if there are more representations of all different diverse group. So those are sort of my view, regarding any kind of obstacles in my career.
Great. So I think that was something, it is actually related to the one that you mentioned. So like, do you have any message for women in the STEM field? STEM means science, technology, engineering, and math. So like, these are undergrads, even high school. I mean, I have two daughters. I think you have two daughters. It is important to have, role models. And what they should do essentially, if they go to a class, I think the one that you mentioned, also like if you go as a faculty to a department that not too many female faculty are there, or if you go to a class, that happens actually to some of my class, they have only one person like female students. That does not feel good to me. So if you are that person, what are the messages that you have for them?
I would say when I was in college, there were, and especially in grad school, I often was the only woman in the classroom, and I just sort of like ignored it. I don't care if I'm the only woman in there. It's not true for everybody. And I think that's a problem that we can all solve by trying to encourage more underrepresented groups to be part of our field. I think everybody coming in from different backgrounds come along with their life experience. And that's what makes us, each one of us, individual. And that perspective is valuable, especially if we want technology to be used by all humans. We need to make sure that the technology design and evaluation and research, from get-go, it's going to consider all perspective so that our research can be used by all humans. After all, the collection of minority is the majority. So it's important for us to remember that all collections of minority groups actually exceeds the so-perceived majority group. And we want our technology to be successful. We want to collaborate across all spectrum so that we can ensure that our work, our legacy can be enjoyed by humanity in its all. And that's my view, and I think this is everybody's responsibility. It's not just the minority group. It's everybody's responsibility, and it's good for you. It's good for everybody.
It's good for everyone. Like if I'm a male, I should try to help in this thing to get a diversity. And of course, diversity is one is like about men versus women. There are several things about race, religion, etc. I think we should consider all of them. Right. That's very important. But at the same time, also, if you are a person at some place and there's not too many, like a woman in one class, you are the only person, just maybe not care. You should be brave and say, okay, I am here. That is important. And you should not care about whether others are.
I totally agree with you. It never bothers me. And I think it is important for anyone who is a minority in any environment. Just remember, just because you're a minority doesn't make anything less of you. And, and you should be proud if you are there, and just carry on. And, but just remember, we all have the responsibility to ensure a diverse representation of any workplace and any team. Because like I say, we are doing technology development and innovation as a team, so that we can serve as many people as possible. And because of that reason, we have to keep the human perspective in mind, that we want as diverse representation as we possibly can in our team, so that our work can be enjoyed by as many people as possible. So at least that's my view, from the diversity and inclusion perspective, because it's healthy to develop any kind of research or product or, you know, any goods, incorporating all diverse view and all diverse representation.
Great. So one other question, actually, this is like the last one that I want to ask, and then you can add any more comments if you have it. So, see, you have been selected, I mean, like elected actually recently in the National Academy of Inventors. I think that might be good. That's a great honor. I mean, congratulations.
Thank
so,
you.
can you tell us, I mean, what's going there essentially? So, you had the startup, you have in this the company, and of course, you had the patents. So, I mean, there are several, I mean, these are a few important one: National Academy of Inventors, National Academy of Engineering, and National Academy of Science. So these are like three major ones. The name might be a bit different, but these are science, engineering, and inventors. So I think. So what is? I mean, have you participated in one of their meetings? So what do we discuss there?
I just got elected. I have not participated in their meeting. I have served on the panel that review some of the national agency like NSF and NIST and NIST. So, you know, some of these committee by these National Academy, they serve in terms of sort of charting out the future direction for the country. They evaluate some of the government agency, like I mentioned, NSF programs gets reviewed. NIST program gets reviewed, and I'm sure other national labs gets reviewed. I have served on all kind of review panel for other country in Europe. You know, so multiple European country, I have served on the review panel as well for their national labs. And I serve on all different university review panel as well. So it's a lot of fun because it's a learning experience. I consider a privilege to serve, and I consider an honor to serve. And, you know, and it's also a learning experience for me to be part of all these different review panel, because you really get to see a really wide spectrum of what's going on. And it's just a great experience.
Yeah, again, congratulations. I think that's a good view that you gave actually. So it means that it's more work essentially when you go there. So that and of course you will enjoy it because you will learn the top-notch research or top-notch inventions. But at the same time, I mean, this is the work there. It's not the honor at the same time is work, and this is the opportunity to serve the country and others. Great. So anything else that you want to add that I missed, or you want to add it about all this that we discussed?
I don't have no, I don't have much to add. I mean, I'll just say that, you know, life is a learning experience, and there will always ups and downs, and there will be challenges, and there will be pleasures, there will be, you know, great experiences. But, you know, when you encounter a setback and you encounter things that are not as great as you would hope, and, you know, any kind of bottleneck you run into, any kind of challenge you run into, it's all part of the life experiences. And I like to think it build characters and it make us stronger, and it's contribute to our life experiences that I don't think we should ever see any kind of these negative experiences as negative. You know, it's a lesson, and it makes all of us stronger. And I think, you know, it also makes us who we are and what we are. And I'm continuing to learn. And one of the greatest things I like about being a professor and being academia is I feel like I'm always learning. I enjoy being academia, and you know, just like my attitude is life is about experiences, and life is about learning. And yeah, if you like learning, it's great to be in academia.
Yeah. So just one question. Some of the audience actually asked this question. So are you reading too much book? Are you listening to podcasts, audiobooks, etc.? So what is the life for a scientist?
I'm one of the most boring person. I don't read a lot of podcasts because I don't commute a lot. If I tell people probably don't believe me. I listen to music when I drive because it relaxes me. I read a lot of news. I do web browsing as well, just like everybody else. I read a lot of news. I unfortunately, I would read the books. I'm not going to talk about the books I read. I read books people have given me, and whenever I run into a problem, I read books. I read a lot of papers online. I'm not much of social media fan, but I do browse through social medias. So yeah, I read stuff online, and I definitely read news. I care about the world.
Great. Okay, so and I think that was good. I mean, that's like I think the life, like if you're a scientist, I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, it is the case. I mean, if you want to, you cannot be expert in everything. I think it is good to have some time. For me, I mean, like the best time that I'm doing some of these audiobooks is the time that I'm running actually. That because the running is not it's a boring thing. Boring.
Running is not boring.
Yeah, I mean, running actually on a treadmill is boring. Running like other places is much better. And the only thing that actually is good for me that whenever I want to, I mean, sometime to have to essentially listen to some audiobooks, etc. Okay, I will go and run, and during that time, there's a good time that I can do that. So in that sense, it's a motivation that motivates both. I mean, essentially reading book in some sense, as well as doing exercise. But yeah, that's, I mean, a bit hard. I mean, we cannot do everything, unfortunately. Or we have only 24 hours, and as we discussed, I mean, we are talking sometime at 3 a.m. and we need to wake up at the early morning even. They have kids. So not that much, I mean, more we can do that. Great. I think thanks a lot for coming to this. I think that was great. So we will make this one available. It will be in Instagram. Also, we will put it on YouTube. And I think that's a great experience. This is something that will remain. Hopefully, everyone can look at it, even grandchildren, who knows, that they listen to us and enjoy that. So thanks again. And I think it was a great chat, and we will talk more.
Thank you, Mohammed, for the invitation. Thanks again.
Thanks,
you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.